Hey, peace and blessings to you. My name is Jerry B. I am the entree musician, and so are you. And so is this young brother that we're going to have a great conversation with today. I'm telling you, he has to be the busiest entree musician I know, living by coastally, and we'll find out exactly what that means. But the CEO of Bark Entertainment, this is Zach Lindenberg, and he's doing all of the right things, making all of the right moves, and being an excellent example of how it's done. Zach, what's going on, my friend?
Hey, Jerry B, it's nice to be here. Thank you for that lovely, lovely introduction. How are you?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic, and it's been a long time since I've seen you.
I know I can't even count how many times, like how many days it's been.
Oh man, not even 24 hours. But in any event, it's so great to see you, man. And I really enjoyed the conversations that we've been having. Of course, we need to give a shout out to More Than a Mastermind and Brandon David for calling all of these unique people together. That's how I met you. But I was so grateful to know about all of the great work you're doing at Bark Entertainment. And I have like 100,000 questions for you if you think you can handle.
I'm ready to go when you are.
Well, first of all, you told me what Bark stood for, and I found that to be unique. What does Bark stand for in the Bark Entertainment?
So when you think of Bark Entertainment, if you're not familiar with my work, or really the first thing that would come to mind would be a dog. And sorry,
True.
but you'd be wrong
True.
in this case. um, for me, when I was really trying to figure out during COVID, work wasn't really coming in like as in job related. Like I couldn't really find a job or get a job internally. So what was the next best thing for what I was doing was to make a company and provide a service when times were tough. So what I wanted to do was take all of my background, all my knowledge, and all of my characteristics, and really put it out there to serve others in the music industry and a lot of other facets as well.
Mm.
So I started playing around with a bunch of different names, and for some reason, I took a few, and it usually takes me forever to think of a name. Like if I'm playing a video game and the first thing is to create a character, I'm in trouble. I got to think of all the little characteristics. What do I want the character to look like? Even if it's going to wear armor or costumes, whatever. But the name at the last point always is the worst because I'm terrible at coming up with names. But
Wow.
for some reason, this one struck out to me, and I did my research, and it ended up being Bark.
Mm.
And I wanted to do something within the music industry, so entertainment, to encapsulate more of a broad sense of things. Where, like I said, it could be music,
Yeah.
something else, like really whatever else creative wise. And Bark stood out to me because what I wanted to do with my company that I was creating was encapsulate and help support and protect the
Mm.
clients that I'm going to represent. And Bark for me was a tree. And what that meant is as it grows and continues to be nurtured, bark on the outside protects it from outside forces that want to harm it, like the weather,
Mm.
uh, human nature coming in, and really just show that like we're here to protect you as a client, as an individual. We see this unique person, and we
Mm-hmm.
want to make it up it grow and nurture it, water it, and really give it all the opportunity that it can have. So that's where Bark Entertainment came from.
Well, it's amazing because most of the people who tune into this show automatically assume that the people we're having conversations with are musicians. So I guess we should have taken a step back and said, especially those who are watching, see the records behind you, see the instruments behind you. You have been a musician for most of your life. That is correct, right?
Yeah, a large portion of it, I would say. I've been dabbling in all types of things, but definitely music has always been a passion of mine. Started out as a musician, played in multiple bands, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was a metal band. I was the bassist, and I really got a handful of like being in a living room with like a drummer and then the two stack amp in the background, the bass, and then like the hard, heavy
Mm.
vocals all center of the living room. So you always leave practices like you're deaf basically. Just goes that hard. My drummer break like three sticks as each practice. So I got into that, and I was like, this is what I really enjoy. And through the evolution of what I was doing, I just got into different bands and really started figuring out like, oh, these people are so much fun. Everyone brings something unique to the table. So that's where it really started for me as a musician. And then over time through that, I started figuring out that I really wanted to do something in the music industry, but I didn't think music, playing music at least, was my kind of role that I had. I wanted to see more of a bigger picture. And I quoted myself a long time ago, and I don't remember what I said, but basically it was like, I want, I used to play, but now I want to help others play, something like that. And I
Wow.
wanted to show that like they're, they can bring so much, as you showed me the other day, and really just wanted to show that people need help and like they're struggling, and not only struggling to get on the top and try to grind, but also dealing with a lot of mental things in a negative sense that are holding them back or not allowing them to be at their full potential. So I
Wow.
saw a lot of that, and I that's where my journey started to start being in the business, or at least in the industry, helping others.
That's pretty amazing. So I guess we can take a step forward now that we've calmed everyone's nerves that I'm talking to a real musician with respect to what the mission of Bark Entertainment is. I mean, you told us what Bark stood for in the protective angle, but how do you serve musicians in your space?
Well, before I started as a company, I was huge advocate for mental health. Like I said, evolving my kind of career, like my interest from being a musician to helping musicians, I saw a lot of negative space of like they're dealing with a lot of anxiety, depression, addiction, stresses that most people really wouldn't understand under the surface because everyone's performing and putting on a show or a facade, depending on who they are.
Correct.
So most people aren't going to see that on stage or on a music video. They're going to see happy, energetic individuals playing something that they're passionate about. But are they passionate deep down? What's holding them back, really? What's the message? Are they bringing it out in their song? Are they bringing it out in social media? Things like that now. So a lot of this goal with Barker Entertainment was to show advocacy for struggling musicians within the mental health world. And then that kind of evolved kind of down the line a few years later, where I was in my undergrad going through psychology, and I really thought I really want to help people in ways that I can get not in their head, but like help them in their head and figure out what is happening and see if we can find ways or strategic plans of how to get out of a space when you don't need to be in it. It's good to be in a space for like writing
Yeah.
because you get to feel the emotion, but how to get out of that in a healthy way. So that's
Wow.
what I really wanted to go into. And then kind of later down the line, I found a place in California that was doing a mediation certificate program, and I graduated in that. And I thought, wow, okay, I can add another tool into my tool belt,
Yeah.
and I can help mediate a lot of issues with like different band members, their managers, promoters, engineers, publishers, things like that, and see if we can find some type of way to resolve a lot of these issues um, in ways that won't lead to burning bridges,
Wow.
or at least you can say what you need to say, and the relationship ends, but there's no bad blood in the end.
Man, that
Because a lot
is,
of that in the industry is a lot of
yeah.
you got to work with me on this record or like this artist or like if you go to them you're going to be blacklisted from this area, and that's not cool. No
Yeah.
one wants that kind of over their head. So how do you come together and really put your heads down and figure out how to settle this reasonably as
Yeah.
adults and as professionals?
That
And then that kind of aspired into more and more into the business side when COVID hit. I just took all of that and then put it all together under a package and
man.
ran with it to what I'm doing now. And then I guess to answer that whole thing as a question of what's the goal is really just to at that point in COVID, it was to manage artists, and then through some other steps that happened in a positive way, it transformed into more of a Web3 kind of process, which again is a teaching process
Yeah.
and more of a consulting.
Well, I was going to ask about that. I mean, I thought, man, first of all, everything that you have described in the work that Bark Entertainment does is absolutely necessary. And I've never heard of a company quite like yours before, in the sense that, as you said, all of the bad blood and being able to mediate, the different emotions that musicians, artists, publishers are going through. And how do you take something that's going to be so contentious, and we're ready to go to court, and you can sit down with a Zach Lindenberg and actually iron the wrinkles out, is absolutely fantastic. But I saw on your resume as well, before we get into the Web3 space, that you are also a mediator for the LA bar. So you work with attorneys and whatnot all the time. Is that just music industry attorneys or across the board?
That's actually kind of funny because that's actually the program that I was talking about where I got certified was the LAGBA program in
Ah,
California. So
gotcha.
it was really interesting because it was like going back into university and sitting in a classroom and spending 8 hours with all of these really unique and successful attorneys and lawyers and getting to hear a lot about their stories during like breaks or lunch sessions whenever we had them. But super interesting just sitting next to some people that had way like just had years of experience coming into this to get certified in something more. And I thought that was interesting because at the time I was like, why would you want to be certified in this when you're already successful in your field? Then it hit me because I'm doing the same thing. It's because to add another tool in your tool belt
Sure.
because you never know when
Sure.
you're going to need it. And like it always just helps people out. It'll always just help you in your career. Even if you
Right.
don't use it, at least you have the knowledge of how to have like a roadmap in your own field to apply with the tools that you've learned. So I thought that was
Fantastic.
really interesting. It was so surreal. It was like people still being on their phones sometimes, just like checking emails, listening, raising their hands still. And I was like, wow, this is so unique. Like all of these professionals, but they're still like in a classroom setting. So we're all in this together, or
Wow.
like we all have this like commonality. It was super interesting, and I really enjoyed the time there.
That's fantastic. Let me ask you a personal question with regard to the choices you've made, which have turned into your business. As you were playing in these various bands and going deaf from the rehearsals, were there any personal experiences or emotional traumas from band member to band member that you stood up close and personal and thought, something, I can do something about this? So it was more personal as you walked into this business arena?
I would say yes. Yes, there's always going to be emotions. Sometimes there's always fights or something that breaks out between band members, but everyone's trying to figure it out. Or like,
Sure.
I want to work on making this section happen, or I want to work on this section and make it happen. And then there's disputes where it's like, no, I don't want that. It doesn't fit for me, or
Right.
or I'm the biggest person in the band, so I call the shots. And you're like,
Right.
no, the democracy. If you want us to all play and sync up together, then all of us have to be one. So how do we
Sure.
do that?
Sure.
So there's always going to be disputes like that, even if you're friends or not. But a lot of them have been individual things where people have come up to me and been like, I really like, I feel this way and I want to write something like this. So we'll sit down and talk. We'll have deep discussions. Sometimes they don't write about it. I think it's more of just they want to get something off their chest or something that's been inside them for a while, and they're like, I either want to write it out um, lyrically or instrumentally, and
Yeah.
we'll see if it fits in the song, or it's just like we just want to get it out and just talk about it. And one of my friends at the time, he was the guitarist, and he just played beautifully, and it came from a very struggle filled background and a lot of obstacles he had to get through in his life. I think they came out in his music, um, which showed me like there is beauty in something that a lot of people seem to miss because they
Yeah.
want to hear a lot about the lyrics and what they mean. But if you don't have a lot of the instrumentals to help back that up, sometimes it doesn't have the same impact. And I think that's where we have a lot of
Yeah.
the music we have is just if it's all work together in one package, it can be all summed up beautifully. But if not, there's a disconnect, which could be cool
Yeah.
depending on how you want to shape it. But
Exactly.
yeah, I haven't really had much like disputes along band members in my personal experience, but I know some bands. like that you hear in like the news that have like broken up over like the dumbest stuff sometimes,
Exactly.
or things happen on stage and it's like, oh, can't have that, we're done.
Oh my gosh. Hey, did you see the Eagles documentary? The most recent one they've done, where it opens with them on stage playing some of their biggest hits in front of a a crowd of people, and they're having an argument on stage. I thought, man, that's incredible. For a band to be so legendary and to be together for decades and decades, but it gets to a point where those emotions kind of spill over into the performance. I thought that was one of the most oxymoronic things that I'd ever experienced. So check out
I'm gonna
that.
have to check that out.
Yeah, check out that documentary, man. And I think they should call you.
Yeah, probably.
But before we build that bridge into the Web3 and the work that you've done with NFTs and whatnot, tell me about what I'm seeing in the background there. Are these bands that you've worked with, or what's going on with the Decor?
A lot of it is mainly just backdrop. The
Ah,
guitar behind me is actually a 5-string bass,
mm-hmm.
um, that I've been dabbling with from time to time. A lot of these bands are like AC/DC, Soundgarden. I think
Ah,
I got a Taylor Swift at the very top left, and then I have some still in albums, like their sheets and everything, and then some behind me. Behind this wall, I have like
mm.
3 little shelves that look like this one over here that have
Oh,
just like really nice ones that I've enjoyed. So it's more of just like a really nice backdrop, but it also shows like the history of what these are. And sometimes when I'm on calls, some people are like, "Do you know what those are? Do you know what those circles are called?" Like, I know you're young, but like, do you know what those are called? Because we had those.
I
So
had
I enjoy
stacks
having
of them,
those
stacks
little
of them.
icebreakers.
Absolutely. I just didn't. I didn't know. If these might have been bands. I know vinyl has come back with somewhat of a vengeance, but I didn't know 45 records singles were back. So I definitely had to ask. Now let's just
Oh yeah, you're
walk.
good.
Yeah, let's just walk into the aspect of where you took the company from being a service that helps to mediate and protect musicians and help them emotionally and spiritually to the metaverse in the NFT space. How did you make that successful journey?
Well, I think like everything, regardless if you're religious or not, there is a plan, and I not everything that you or myself or whoever thinks they're going to go is going to be the direction in which you're going to go. And I
Mm,
think that can be a blessing if you allow yourself to take that journey and take not exactly that risk, but more
mm,
of like, I'm comfortable, but let's see where this could go. And sometimes it puts you in ways you never thought were possible. And
absolutely.
that happened to me because I reached out to a guy on LinkedIn, and he messaged me back and was like, I told him, I was like, I introduced myself, told him what I was doing, and I'd love to have a meeting with you on Zoom or Google Meet or whatever. He responded and he was like, let's do it. So we had a meeting, and it was really great. We spent probably 2 hours having discussion about who we are, what was his background. He's an older gentleman, and he confided in me some things that he doesn't really tell anyone. What Not exactly personal, but more of like concepts he's done in the past that most people have never thought about, and he was kind of the pioneer in it
Mm,
and starting a lot of things. And he was pretty big in the music industry and told me what had happened and everything. And um, so we had that discussion. And then I said, I would love to meet. I'm in the area. And he said, yeah, let's do it. Let's meet about sometime next week. And I'll send you the address. Here's my email, and we'll figure it out.
mm-hmm.
Great. I sent him an email just saying, like, thank you so much. Like, ready to meet. Let's do it. Here's some details, whatever. So he messaged me back, and about a week later, we met in person at one of his favorite restaurants and kind of the exact same conversation. So I thought, okay, this is probably not going to go where I had hoped it went, but at least I made a connection that was very powerful to me and his industry.
Mm,
He's in the music industry, and he's pretty well connected. So at least like I had a connection there, starting to build a relationship. And at the end, He said he's retired, but he wants to get back into what he was doing, but he doesn't want to do it the exact same way because he was really good at it, but it didn't really do anything for him. He didn't enjoy it. So he
Yeah.
wanted a different way of doing things. And at the time, because I was doing the management and trying to work with artists, one of my main goals was to figure out what's the next step, what's the next innovation for musicians, how do we get them a leg up in something that's
Yeah.
so saturated.
Yeah.
And what that came to be was Web3, NFTs, blockchain. So at that time, I was like, I have no idea what this is, and I need to figure this out for the benefit of musicians. So at
Right.
the limited knowledge I knew at the time, I told him what it was, and a very messy idea of like how to go about it, and just see if that piqued his interest. Where I thought it was going to be, he's going to figure it out and ask me questions because I'm also figuring it out
Mm-hmm.
and establishing more of a deeper relationship through those means. He said, "All right, that's awesome. You know, it's really interesting that you bring all this up because I actually have lunch with someone about every 2 weeks, a few months or whatever, occasionally, and he's a manager who represents major artists in the industry." And he said, "Yeah, when we get together, we'll catch up and I'll tell him what you told me and see if he has any interest." So about that time frame, like we'll figure something out.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we walked out and said our goodbyes and happy to meet again. And then an hour later, he calls me and he says, "You're not going to believe this. I don't know how this happens in today's age, but I somehow butt dialed the guy we were talking about on my iPhone." And I was
Wow.
like, "Oh, that's wild." And I'm like, okay. Now I'm like super interested because I got a random call from him. So I thought, okay, maybe something like happened on his drive or like something. He had like an idea or something. But no, that's what he told me. And I was like, oh, okay. It's like, that's really interesting. Please go on.
Right.
And he said that he caught up with the guy and he told him about me and he wants me to meet him and present this idea and actually pitch it to him and come up with something within 2 weeks
Mm.
about this Web3 concept that you had told me about. And I thought, okay. So immediately I got to work, just sat in this office from sun up to sundown and just worked,
Right.
put together some presentations, and I went and met with him. And it was a really good presentation. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really what started my journey into Web3.
Wow.
And that's what really lifted me off the ground. And I give this guy so much credit because he passed away not too long ago, last
Mm.
year.
Wow.
Um, and so I just want to give him all the respect for giving me the opportunity to step in this direction that I'd never thought was going to be possible,
Absolutely.
and allow me to have an opportunity at this age to have something like this with such a major artist at the time, and they're from an older generation. So
Mm-hmm.
not only did I have to put together this presentation, but as we were talking and developing more of a relationship and coming back to meetings, I had to develop a way to simplify this
I see.
concept and something I didn't even understand at the time. So how do you simplify something you don't understand that's overbearing terminology wise? And it's like you're putting together a vehicle and you know the engine parts at this point, but how do you, but the person doesn't really want to know about the engine parts. They just want to know this body looks really cool. It can go fast and I know how to drive it. Let's go. They just
Right.
want to know that. So how do you simplify all of that to tell them this is the make of the car, this is how fast it runs, and we're going to do it.
Yes.
So they just want to know the specs and how it works. I had to learn all the
The
under the hood
engine.
stuff.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
The
So that's what really
transmission.
started me into my journey into Web3.
So how do you consult artists now? Do they just call you up? Do you set up meetings with them? I know, again, we're going to get into why you live in both California and Tennessee. So, I mean, that might have something to do with it. But, how do you serve your artist with regard to that? Is that just a whole nother division? Is there a course? Is there day-to-day consulting, or how does that work?
Yeah. So I work with individuals, sometimes not even clients, but a lot of people that want to get interested in Web3 in general. Um, so here's what I really tell everyone that wants to know what's going on in a nutshell. My business is I onboard clients. So they already know, if they're in the music industry, what is to be expected in their grind for social media, DSPs, digital streaming platforms like Spotify, Amazon Music, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Music videos, whatever they're doing, like within the Web 2 space already, that's been happening for the last few years. So they're already doing that. They know that. Now the next step is Web 3 and how to acclimate it into what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
without making it another thing they now have to take care of. Like, oh, now I have to know all of this stuff. And now it's just another task on top of all the hundreds of tasks that I already have to do. And I'm like,
Exactly.
so now you have to simplify it in a different way that allows people to be comfortable or at least engaging enough to be like, all right, I can make this work. And how do I make that work?
Mm-hmm.
So I come in and tell them about it and like, what's the real value here? This is no longer buy a picture of a JPEG on the blockchain through the use of a marketplace and have bragging rights.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer that. It's you're giving something back to the community that holds value, intrinsic value. In my
Yeah.
case, I want something that people can learn from. They can experience satisfaction in the product they're receiving, and ultimately learn something that they can have for their own safekeeping or pass on to someone else, but has something of a positive outcome.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I'm doing with clients is showing them that you're no longer just like pushing a piece of merch out and that's it, because people can do whatever they want with that merch and that's it. But
Yeah.
how do you really connect with a fan? How do you really connect with the community differently that you ever had before? And the reason why you can do that is because through the use of blockchain Web3 technology, you're able to have a lot more freedom with your IP, hold your masters, and you can do a lot of creative things that you normally wouldn't be able to
Mm-hmm.
through like record labels or like ways of streaming. You can't really live on streaming unless you're huge.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
that's why you have to have all these other outcomes, or some people have to have like another job.
Right.
It's like what's a way in which you can already do all this but still have a creative process that can get you more attention,
Right.
more revenue, but also just like be more creative in a space that a lot of people haven't before. And could you be the first in something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of us are coming in this space, is to show like what is the next wave
Mm-hmm.
for community and people in the industry, people in other creative fields. How are companies doing this? How are so many different industries coming together, and corporate levels and individual levels coming together or not coming together,
Mm-hmm.
but really just showing how this next wave of technology can benefit in ways that it hasn't before and perform better.
So is Bark Entertainment a do it for you company, or is it show you how to do it, teach a person to fish and let them, embark on it? You were mentioning that it's not just another 7 or 8 series of things that you now have to add on, but does Bark become the service that comes alongside the client and says, "This is what we're doing. Don't worry about that. We want you to know how it's running, but we're handling that aspect for you."
It really depends. People that are curious about coming to Web3 will help you along the way.
Mm-hmm.
We'll encourage you. We'll help you grow. We want to help you grow. So how are we going to do that? Um, if you're already in Web3, maybe you just need some help in like consulting or like what's an idea that I can do moving forward. Then yeah, we'll point you in the right direction when you need it, and we'll be good
Mm-hmm.
to go if that's all you need. But some people, I guess a lot of people in this space are very niche in Web3. So a lot of
Yeah.
people have heard about it, especially right now with all of the impacts surrounding Web3 and the negative stuff. At least people have heard of what an NFT is, a
Yes.
digital collectible, and they always hear this negative kind of feeling towards it because of what's been going on.
Absolutely.
Um, it's because they're not in this space. They just want to push something because it's trendy,
Yeah.
and they're not really diving into like what is it that actually holds the value and really makes this like
Yeah.
viable and
Yeah. I
quality.
I was in a conversation with someone who was curious about why I'm walking in that direction, and just happened to be with Brandon David in Cleveland, Ohio. So, I'm talking to people about why I'm going and what the conference that I'll be that I was attending and participating with, why that was all about. And red flags came up in that person's mind because of what they heard on the news and everything like that. It's really interesting because, we hear about automobile accidents all the time, unfortunately, but it doesn't stop us from driving. Or banks, which unfortunately some of them are held up by unscrupulous people, whether those with the mask on their face or inside the place, but it doesn't stop us from doing our regular banking, So there may be characters who are, who lack integrity, who are going to do some things to skewer the moment, but it doesn't mean that the whole thing is skewered.
I think you said that beautifully. Yeah, because there's always going to be bad eggs and everything. It doesn't mean it ruins the whole bunch. You just pick them out. You're good to go.
Correct.
You still eat them. So yeah, I mean the biggest thing, like you said, with the banks is people on the inside or outside. It's centralized. So like
Yeah.
an example would be like Venmo or PayPal. Like you want to make a transaction, you have to wait for the service of the third party to do it for you. With
Yes.
the use of blockchain, there's none of that. It's decentralized. So it
Mm-hmm.
allows an individual or a collector to buy your project piece or your collectible, and it's a trustless transaction. Once
Mm-hmm.
you have enough money in your wallet or your funds to buy that collection,
Sure. Sure.
then you can do that. And once you hit buy, it immediately, once it's like, all right, you have the funds in your wallet to make the transaction, then you get that immediately. And the person gets the money that was whatever the cost of that collectible was.
Right.
And that's it. Super fast, super quick. It's done. And then they can hold that in their wallet as a collectible, of course, but also if they want to resell it and make some money as well, depending on like gold, the longer you hold it, the longer it'll grow, depending
Right.
on how well the project does.
Yes. That I do understand, and so I'm walking a little faster than I was when you first met me. I still have my training wheels on, but I'm able to pedal a little faster than I was before. But curiosity. Obviously, I said I was going to ask this question. It gets the best of me. Does Bark Entertainment exist on both coasts, both in Tennessee as well as California, or that's just your personal preference of being in both of those places?
Personal preference, but also like I have no problem like on what I do is like I can do remote. So if we need to
Okay.
do meetings or something, like there's no issue, phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I want to help people,
Yeah.
and what better way to do that if you can reach people that are in need of help? Like, how can you be a service and a beacon to help them?
So, who would you
Um,
say is your ideal client then? The person who's sitting, listening, or watching this podcast is like, oh, I'm kind of curious about this, or, I'm in a band and this is happening. Who would you call out as your ideal client to say, yeah, you know what, that's me right there. I need to call Bark today.
well, on I would say for Bark, if you're in the music scene, I do like the company does have criteria, of course, because you need to have yourself at least like semi-established or at least know what you're doing. Because taking on a new project like this, if you don't already have like the necessary tools or like the background that you say you are as a band or musician, and you're on the grind, but if you're the first time musician and you want to get into Web3, I mean, go for it. I mean, I'll help you, but it'll be difficult to work with you because then I also have to teach you how to be a musician yourself
Sure, sure,
and work. So like
sure.
it adds a lot more
I understand
necessity
that.
onto what's going on. So there's a bit of criteria that needs to be met if you want to be within Web3. But if you want to do strictly just Web3 projects and you already have a really creative mind, if you're a digital artist, you're in some other types of facets and things like that
Right.
that aren't necessarily within music, but like you have a good idea of like I'm pretty good at my craft already and I want to step it up. Yeah, let's talk. Let's figure that out.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And so, but those two who may be in a situation where they're about to sign with a production company or indie label, and there's some infighting between the band, they could kind of call you about those issues as well for mediation.
It depends. Because a lot of people have agreements, contracts, or NDAs to which they can't say a lot of things. So
I
sometimes
see.
they just say, I have an issue, but I can't exactly talk about it, but I want to let you know. Or I'm like, well, I'd love to talk to you about that, but we would also have to sign an NDA or some type of agreement that allows our confidentiality not to be leaked or anything like that. But if you already have, like, if you're already with a label, um, or you're with someone already, a lot of them already have the means of which to help you, or at least want to help you if they can. So a lot of them already restrict outside sources.
I see. I
Yeah. So a lot
see.
of like some people like if they have deals or something with companies, they can't exactly work with other artists because those artists are on different record deals. So it's like you got
Gotcha.
to work sometimes within your deal unless you specify I can work with other artists in whatever fashion I want to.
Now
So
you
that
don't.
it just depends on what they're doing.
I understand that. Now, you don't have any type of licensure where it prohibits you from working with another artist in a different state or anything like that. There's no legalities that restrict you.
As far as what I do, no.
Gotcha. Very cool.
Except more of like time.
Well,
Like
yeah,
if they're like, hey, I want to call you at midnight and it's like 2 a.m. my time, like
right.
I'm probably not gonna pick up.
Not the ideal situation. So, how can people get in touch with Bark? Just go to the website, or is there other means that they could, you know, reach out
Yes,
to you?
there's bart-entertainment.com, and at the bottom there's a submission page, but also my LinkedIn at Zach Lindenberg and my LinkedIn profile. I can come to that and message me, connect with me there if you want to ask more questions. A lot of the information is on my LinkedIn about what I'm doing, and a lot about what Bark is doing on the website.
That's absolutely fantastic. Now, I always ask a trick question at the end. Okay, so pay
Mm.
attention because it's a trick question. All right. You do a lot of interviews and your schedule is very tight, Zach. I respect that. So I thank you for giving us the time today. But in the interviews that you generally do, you think, wow, there are questions that kind of always come up, and I was expecting Jerry to ask that question and he never got around to it, or he didn't do it just because he's a lunk or whatever. But with regard to that, do you have an answer for the unasked question? A question you were expecting, I didn't ask it, and you said, you know what, I really want this information out. So, what is that?
Sometimes it's not in the form of a question, but it's more of a form of an idea or a concept that people have, and they want feedback. Um, so that could be in a business or in their own personal life or whatever. It's a lot of people aren't exactly wanting to be asked questions, but more just like a way in which to go through what they're already working out.
Yeah.
So question wise for you, I guess it'd be more, I guess change change the tides a little bit. More of like out of everything you've heard today, like what are your thoughts? What are your means of things? What do you hear that resonates with you through what I've said, or is there anything that you're like I want to hear more about this, or like what is like what are some characteristics that Zach really is more passionate about other than helping people, or like can you talk more about that, or um because I'm always interested in what people have to say or ask questions after I've said something, because I don't know what I've left out, and if people can fill in the blanks, it helps me.
No, I understand that perfectly, but some of the things that were running through my mind, especially as you were explaining the reason for the company's existence and your personal background as to how you're helping musicians. My first thought was, wow, this is a situation that could be not necessarily franchised. I think that's the wrong word to use, but from entrenched into the music industry across all 50 states, it could be a situation where there is a necessity for this type of company to exist because there's so many things that are going on, so many different conflicts that a young musician, especially who walks into this game, doesn't realize this, that, and the other, and the conflicts that can happen emotionally and legally. So having a Bark Entertainment that it exists to help them through that process is absolutely necessary. I don't know why it
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
done before. that's why I thought, wow, I could see this like McDonald's, just everywhere there's a musician or a band or a venue, there's, right across the street is a Bark Entertainment so that they can go and mediate whatever needs to happen. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I mean that with the greatest sense that, wow, I did not know, because you don't know what you need until you hear about it and go, wow, that's an incredible solution. And I think that you've created one, and man, much, much, much success to you, brother.
Thank you, and same to you. I mean, but on these calls that we've had on Thursday nights, it's a lot of it's about leadership, and
Yeah,
it's become a lot deeper than what I had expected and what you have expected that when we
absolutely.
talked about it. And
Yeah,
I think the biggest thing about that is we're not learning to be leaders in our everyday lives, but learning to be leaders in others' lives. But
yes,
you're helping them grow, but it's also that they're helping you grow. Or when you teach something, you retain it more. You start learning things that you hadn't thought about
yeah.
through teaching others, and it lifts both of you up in a very positive way.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. So I guess, well, we're taping this on a Thursday. People should know, and so I'll see you in a couple hours, actually, because
Yes, that is true,
we
and I'm
will be
looking forward
together.
to it.
Absolutely. Well, this is Zach Lindenberg, brothers and sisters, and Bark Entertainment is absolutely a company that you should reach out to. They will help you in the NFT space, and you heard what constitutes as a great client for this company. But I would do it. I would just call Zach anyway. Don't tell him I told you this. We'll put all of their information in the show notes so that you can reach out. But I'll just call them, even if you don't think you fit, and say, hey, Jerry told me to call, and here is my question, or here's my problem, so that they can present the right solution to you. Well, I thank you for hanging out with us. My name is Jerry B. As you know, I am the entree musician, but what's most important is so are you. Don't forget to go to Amazon to pick up my best-selling book. Keep it a best-selling book. It's called The Path of the Entree Musician, 9 Keys to Unlock Your Mindset, Discipline, and Focus. You absolutely should have it. It's small enough to fit in your gig bag or your guitar case, and make it happen. We will see you again next time. Visit theentremusician.com and let's hang out. God bless.